Welcome to the Cloud Council. The Cloud Council brings together the foremost business and technology leaders to seek their advice on navigating the major challenges, both immediate, and there's a lot of immediate right now, and also in the longer term. The Cloud Council airs live at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every other Tuesday on CXO Focus. You can email us at any time at cxofocus@nutanix.com with topics you'd like to see us discussed. And we'll look to address those in future episodes with highly relevant experts. So let's get on to today's discussion. My guest today is advising us on leadership, currency, change, and creating a powerful presence. And trust me, if you YouTube my upcoming guest here and you take a look at some of her recent speeches, you'll understand what I mean by powerful presence. Let's just get to it. To give her insights into leadership, building support networks, creating a powerful presence, I'm really pleased to have Carla Harris, Managing Director at Morgan Stanley, as our guest on today's episode. Welcome, Carla. Tell us more about yourself.
Hi, Ben. Well, I've been on the street for 33 years, and I have learned a lot about not only thriving or surviving in the seat that you sit in, but I've also learned that you can lead from any seat. And I also have figured out that most of us have grown up in a producer culture. That certainly was the environment as I've been on Wall Street, a producer culture. You're the best producer, you move to the top, or you're rewarded with good compensation or with an opportunity to lead and manage other people without any thought as to whether or not you're the kind of person that can motivate and inspire people to deliver beyond that which they thought that they could do. And that is something that I want to share with other leaders these days, because that, interestingly enough, is the kind of leader that is required in today's environment. So I've seen a lot, Ben, and have quite a big perspective on this.
That's great. I'd love to hear a little about your career journey, because it's a great one. I'd love to hear how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I started right out of Harvard Business School in 1987, and I went straight to mergers and acquisitions. And frankly, I went to M&A because I am negatively motivated. That is something you should know about me. When you say I can't do something, I'm all over it, like a bad smell, as I like to say. So I went into M&A because I thought, frankly, if that was the hardest place for people to be, I would learn the most in the shortest period of time. And then after about 4 years in M&A, the M&A market died. It was hot in 87, hot in 89. Died pretty much in 90, was dead squared in 91. And that's when I said, if I'm going to be long-term in investment banking, I should go to capital markets. I don't know anything about the bread and butter of investment banking, and that is capital raising. So I did that for the bulk of my career, and then moved, as I looked for a new challenge, moved to asset management to help the firm raise a fund that would invest in women and minority-owned asset managers. But my timing could not have been worse. I did that in the summer of 08. I don't need to tell you what happened by September of 08. But even then, I will tell you, Ben, that was a smart move, because one of the reasons I did that was I felt like I wasn't taking enough risk in my career. And I said there are three things that you should ask yourself when you're thinking about taking a risk, or you're thinking about doing something that you construe as a risk. Number one, will the new thing give you skills and experiences that you wouldn't get if you stayed in your current seat another 12 months? Second question, will the new thing expose you to people, relationships, or networks that you wouldn't get if you stayed in your current seat another 12 months? Third question, will that new thing create new branches on your personal decision tree of opportunity, i.e. you could go off and do some other things you wouldn't have been able to do if you stayed in your current seat another 12 months? If the answer to all three of those things is yes, you should take that risk. And that was one of those risks. Did I learn new things that I wouldn't have learned if I stayed in my seat? Absolutely. I had zero exposure to asset management for, at that point, 20 some odd years in my career. Two, I started relationships with people who controlled hundreds of billions of dollars of pension assets. Again, no exposure to them throughout my entire career. And third, I could work anywhere within an asset management firm, not even run an asset management firm now. And I would not have been able to do that had I not taken that risk. So I like to say the big lesson there is it's not always about whether or not you'll be successful in that risk. It's about how you leverage it for having taken the risk on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. Risk is important, fail fast and learn from it. I want to talk to you, Carla. So you've written a lot about this. You write about Carla's pearls.
Yes, my
And
hard-earned and hard-learned pearls.
and the marketer me loves the integrated campaigning here, right? It's the spoken word, it's the visual look, it's everything around it. I want you to talk more about that. I mean, one thing you talk about, I think it's one of them, is expect to win.
Mhm.
But let's talk about that in the context of today versus if we were speaking to each other, say, 6 to 9 months ago. Obviously, we're in a time of significant change, of
Yeah.
crisis,
Mhm.
of a lot of different and unique pressures that we all face in our respective business worlds. So I'd love you to talk more about Carla's Pearls, expect to win. What does that mean? How do you think about that today when you speak to people or advise people compared to just recently?
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I'm talking to leaders today, I said it's even more important that you have an expect to win mentality and an expect to win demeanor every day that you show up, and especially when you show up in front of your people. And I'd say, even more importantly, as you're showing up in front of your people like this, where you cannot touch them, it's important because people don't understand what's going on around them. They certainly have a high degree of anxiety about the fact that they don't know what's on the other side of this experience. We all have never seen COVID-19 before. None of us have experienced this level of social unrest in our lifetime. Those of us who are in the leadership seats today, when this was going on in our country 50 plus years ago, we were little kids if we were even born. So many people who are sitting in positions of leadership and authority have never seen anything like this. So it's important that you understand your facts. Your facts are you got to where you got to because you're really good. You also know how to build relationships with people because otherwise you would not have been able to get to the leadership seat. So it's important that as you approach that, even when you cannot see, even when you don't know the outcome, you should approach it knowing that you have the intellect, the experience, or the access to other relationships that you can leverage that will allow you to get to the right solutions for your team and for your company right now. So it's about having an expectation that you will win, an expectation that you will do well, as opposed to making the decision to have the expectation that you don't know how this is going to go. And it might not turn out well, because if you have that mentality, it will lead you to that outcome. And I have seen it over and over and over again after 3 decades on the street.
Carla, one thing I heard you talk about is it's kind of head up or head down, particularly in times of crisis or in times where, we as leaders or aspiring leaders are faced with some tough challenges, right? Questions around cost cutting, even fear about
Yes.
your own position. You
Mhm.
talked about the choice, keep your head down, put your head up. I'd love for you to
Yes.
talk more about that.
Yes, that's when I talk about the pearl of taking risks. Because
There.
as I've seen so many tough periods in our economies over 30 some odd years, because frankly, every 4 or 5 years, in my opinion, we found ourselves in an economic valley. And I tell people, keeping your head down does not keep you from getting shot, as I like to say. So you might as well keep your head up so you can see the bullet coming, is the way I like to joke about it. But what I mean by that is whenever we are in tough economic times, it is not the time to keep your head down. Because the issue with keeping your head down is that you submerge your voice, and your voice is at the heart of your power. When you submerge your voice, that is when you become irrelevant. During these times, that's when you should put forth your ideas. The good news about the kinds of times that we're in now, Ben, is that the rule books are being rewritten. It is an opportune time to put your imprimatur on what it's going to look like going forward. Nobody has the answers, especially in an environment where no one has seen it. So why wouldn't your assertion, your idea be valued? And why wouldn't it potentially be the one that actually dictates what the future looks like? So now's the time to put the out of the box ideas out there. Now's the time to let your voice be heard. Now is the time, especially as a leader, to call a thing when it's not right, if the environment is not right, when it could use improvement. If you need to do an overhaul, now's the time to call it. Chaos breeds opportunity. And the beauty about this chaos is that if you're trying to make change, especially cultural change, you have the air cover of COVID-19. You have the air cover of the broader social unrest to try to make that change. And oh, by the way, don't worry about losing your best people, because at the end of the day, with this kind of economic environment, where are they going? And if they're walking out the door, they were going anyway. So you don't have to worry about the change being the thing that will make you lose your best talent.
Yeah, I think that's really important context and advice during these times. And it is during these times of crisis, it's an opportunity to reinvent in many cases. I want to talk about authenticity, right? You talk about this in a very compelling way with your own personal experience about what you thought was your authentic self coming into, working on Wall Street and then what you discovered about the power of authenticity. And I think you talk about the power is you. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share more about that, your personal experience, your advice for others.
Absolutely. And I'll start with the advice. No one can be you the way that you can be you. It is indeed your distinct competitive advantage. And what I have found is anytime you are trying to speak or behave in a way that is inauthentic, that's when you create the competitive disadvantage. If you are trying to penetrate client relationships, the easiest way to penetrate the relationship is to bring your authentic self to the table. When you bring your authentic self to the table, people trust you. And trust is at the heart of any successful relationship. The story that I like to tell is I'm also a singer. I have done 5 sold out concerts at Carnegie Hall, 2 sold out concerts at the Apollo, and have recorded and released 3 CDs, just finished my 4th, and I hope we will be able to release it for this coming holiday season because it is a holiday CD. But when I started in this business as an investment banker, especially in M&A, I was told, you can't tell anybody you're doing anything else. You got to focus just on M&A. You got to eat, sleep, and breathe it. If people think you're interested in anything else, they won't take you seriously as a banker. So I didn't talk about the fact, and I didn't want anybody else to talk about the fact that I was a singer. I wanted to be seen and known as a no-nonsense, hard-driving, quantitative, analytical investment banker. I'm not here to sing and dance, boys. Let's not get it twisted. Didn't want anybody to talk about that until I saw the client reaction. Because against my objections, of course, my colleagues would take me into the room to pitch and say, oh, this is Carla Harris, our capital markets banker. But what you really ought to know about Carla, she's an amazing gospel singer. She sung at Carnegie Hall and Radio City and the Apollo. And I'm there rolling my eyes until I saw the reaction. Oh, you're a singer? Well, I certainly admire people who can sing. And I personally love to sing, but my family will only let me sing in the shower. And there we were, Ben, having a 15-minute conversation before the pitch, the meeting before the meeting. Yeah. So when I sat down to pitch, they heard me with a different ear because Carla Harris, the singer, was allowed to be in the room with Carla Harris, the banker. I naturally differentiated myself from the other 5 bankers that would come in there and pitch that same IPO that afternoon. So now, whenever I go into a new situation, I bring Carla Harris, investment banker, Carla Harris, the prayer warrior, Carla Harris, investment manager, Carla Harris, the singer, the writer, the speaker, the mother, the golfer, the football fan. I bring all those Carlas to the table because I don't know which Carla will be the one that will connect and allow me to own the relationship in a proprietary way. And my last point for you is if you choose to sit in the leadership seat, it is even more important that you bring your authentic self to the table because then you motivate and inspire those who are working with you to bring their authentic selves to the table. And anytime any of us is in an environment where we can be who we really are, we always outperform. And that will now accrue to your status in that leadership seat.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. And I think it speaks to reading the room and knowing your audience, even on the fly, and using that EQ, right? The emotional quotient to figure that out. I remember when I heard you tell this story again on YouTube, and I'm going to tweet out the link because it is worth every second to check it out. I was thinking probably one of the most effective speeches I gave, it was actually an interview and it was at our user conference. So a lot of technologists and IT professionals in the room. They tended to skew towards 30, 40-year-old men more than women, although we're working on that. But the most effective session I gave was we brought Mark Hamill, who was Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker in Star
Yeah.
Wars on stage, and my authentic self was my Star Wars geek self. And and I tell you, it was a great back and forth conversation. We didn't talk about tech or cloud computing or hyperconverged infrastructure or anything at all. But I got to tell you, I had a lot of great conversations after that session because,
Yeah.
we connected on a personal level. In my case, being a Star Wars geek, I'm not a gospel singer that's performed at Carnegie Hall. Not that I'm jealous, but I think it's a great example. I think all of us can probably start to connect ways we could live by that advice. 90-day rule. You've written about that. So why
Yeah.
is this so important for leaders? What's your
Yes.
advice there?
Yes, most people think that they have, at least a half a year when there's a half year check-in or a whole year before they can actually put the points on the board. But if you're a leader and people are trying to follow you, you have to think to yourself, I have 90 days to establish who I am as a leader. When they're not around me or when they're driving home, how do I want them to think about who I am as a leader? Do I want them to think that, that I'm a good listener, that I'm really thoughtful, that I'm a strategic thinker, that I'm inclusive? How do I want them to think about me? And you start from that end, and that should govern your behavior on a day in and day out basis. And I have found that it is sort of natural that after about 90 days, 1/4, people will start to think of you in a certain way, however you have trained them to think about you. And you have that opportunity as a leader, but don't think that you have a whole year or that you even have half a year to establish that in people's minds. You should govern yourself towards 90 days, and that perception is then set.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. Yeah, I want to take a turn here. I want to talk this one. I really am a strong believer on, and I'd love to hear more from you on this. In your professional life, in your personal life, you can have mentors, you can have advisors, you can have sponsors. And if you're really lucky, you have all three. And I think part of your message is got to have all three. How do you have them all? So I'd love
Yeah.
for you to talk more about those three. Maybe, okay, how do you define
Yeah.
each of those? And how do you need to make sure that each of those has an important place in your personal and professional life?
Yes, and thank you so much for that question, Ben, because frankly, you can have them all, but the key is to understand what they are. So
Yeah.
let's start there. The advisor is anybody in your environment that can answer your discrete questions because they have the intellect and or the experience to answer your questions. So Ben, I'm doing my first client presentation. Can we go through the table of contents? I want to make sure I don't miss any of our competitive arguments. Or Paul, let's go through the weighted average cost of capital. I think you all do it differently than I did it in my old firm. Allison, can you introduce me to EJ? I'm going to be working with him and I want to get to know him before we actually start this project. Those are examples of discrete questions. And again, anybody in your environment that has the intellect and or the experience to answer the question can be labeled an advisor. Now, the mentor, on the other hand, is the person you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. So by definition, it needs to be somebody that you trust. I can't say that, oh, Ben has been in the cloud for the last decade, he's going to be my mentor. Because if you don't know me very well, you cannot be a great mentor to me. You could be an outstanding advisor, but you couldn't be a mentor because a mentor's job is to give you tailored advice, tailored specifically to you and to your career aspirations. So if I know Paul and I know EJ and they both want to become senior vice presidents and I'm a good mentor, I will give them two different strategies because they are two different men. And a mentor's job is to give you that tailored advice that you can successfully execute. This is the person that you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. You talk to them about your mistakes, your triumphs, your strategies. I'm in this box, I want to be in this box. Who do I work and how do I get there? Now, here's the deal. Popular business press loves to say you need a mentor, you need a mentor, you need a mentor. But at the end of the day, they don't tell you the differentiation between the mentor and the sponsor, nor do they tell you that you can survive a long time in your career without a mentor. But you will not ascend in any organization without the sponsor. The sponsor is the most important relationship that you will have in your career. And I said earlier that the mentor was the person you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. The sponsor is not the person you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. The sponsor is the person you tell the good, and the good, because this is the person that is carrying your paper into the room. This is the person that behind closed doors, where all of the important decisions about your career will be made behind closed doors. This is the person that will spend their valuable political and social capital on you. So there needs to be a very good reason why they're spending this capital on you. And you need to be able to articulate why you are worthy of their spending this capital on you. Now, I will tell you that people ask me all the time, how do you get a good mentor? How do you get a good sponsor? Well, remember, the mentor does not need to be within your organization, nor do they need to look like you. They just need to understand the context that you're working in order to give you that tailored advice that you can successfully execute. And don't overlook peer mentors. Sometimes your peers can be some of your best mentors because they know you very well. And if you are comfortable that that person has your best interest at heart, then they could qualify as a good mentor candidate. So anybody in your environment that knows you well, that will give it to you straight, no chaser, and can give it to you in the context of your environment, you could label that person a mentor. The sponsor, on the other hand, here's the profile. They need to be within your organization. They need to have a seat at the decision-making table, and they need to have some juice. So I tell people, when you're thinking about who could be your sponsor, study your environment for 2 weeks. Understand who has the influential voice, who has a seat at the decision-making table, who might be toxic, or who might be someone that's an influencer to people who have seats at the table. And then start to intersect with them in your environment. Find reasons that you can intersect and touch. And then you can start to build that relationship. Because a relationship, frankly, Ben, is just frequency of touch. If you think about who's close to you in your life, it's people that you've spent some time with or that you keep interacting with over time. That's how you build a relationship. So now you can be strategic about how you touch that person and build that sponsor relationship.
Yeah, I think it's such a great conversation. And I think as you're talking, I think about, I think it's an important point about mentors, that peers can be often the most effective mentors you have. I have a really good friend who's also a chief marketing officer at a tech company in a similar space. And we've known each other for a long time. We've worked for each other actually in both ways each time. So we know each other well. And we have, like Charlie Brown and Lucy, we have doctors, psychologists, 5 cents, doctors hours are in, and we call it doctors hours. And so we have some very similar pressures. How's lead gen going? How are we doing on this messaging for this launch or the like? And it is probably the most valuable time I have. And we don't even schedule it because we just, ad hoc connect with each other. And I think it's almost necessary for mental health too, because it gives you a sounding board and someone who will call you on your blank, right? If maybe you're doing something not in the right way. And I like sponsorship too, and it's within your organization. It could be someone who was in your organization that can open up doors for you for new opportunities or the like. I'm wondering if you have any examples, as you're comfortable sharing, of any of those 3 that have been particularly impactful in your career.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I will tell you that my best mentors have been my peers, and they have been my peers outside of this business, but they understand the context because they are service providers to my industry. So they know financial services and they know investment banking in particular. And there's one mentor who I've kept for the entire, tenure that I have actually been on the street. And I call her my script mentor. Whenever I'm about to have one of those conversations and tell the boys exactly how much I think I need to get paid or why I think I need to have this next opportunity, I'll call her with my script that I have created. And to this day, Ben, as good as I might think that I am with respect to preparing my narrative to be compelling and to get what I want or need, to this day, she will find a way to turn the screw just one more time and make it even more impactful and make it better. Right. So, and I trust her. I know that when I'm speaking to her, there's one agenda item, and that is me. And so the person that you are choosing to call your mentor, as I alluded to earlier, or as I said earlier, you need to know that you know that you know that this person has your best interest at heart. If you're not 100% confident of that, then with all due respect, I would call that person an advisor and not a mentor. But you have to know that that person has your best interest at heart if you're going to call them a mentor.
Yeah, well said. I want to talk about perception. It's easier to say this. I think it's a lot harder to practice this. But you've talked about perception. I think you call it the Copilot to reality, right? Which is
Yes.
I love the phrase for that. And it can really impact how people deal with you. So how do you take that? I think it's a well understood concept, but it's a lot harder to manage that perception. And I'm in marketing, so I think about perception and reality every single day, right? That's a big thing in tech, right? How do you make
Yeah.
sure there's the perception, but then the reality of what the technology enables you to do?
Yes.
Talk to me more about that from your point of
Yes.
view.
In the context of the career, I say to people, don't just say, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to work really hard, and I know that I'll go far because people see that I'm good and I'm smart. What you need to do if you want to maximize your success in the seat that you're in or the seat that you aspire to sit in is that you should work in a way that is valued by the organization. So when you are going into a role, you need to ask the question, what are the adjectives that describe a superstar in this role? Now, the answer that you're going to hear will tell you what they value. And the other question I tell people to ask all the time, give me the profile or the adjectives of the last person you fired. Doesn't have to be in this role, but in general. Now you'll know what the organization does not value. Because if you go in saying, I'm going to work hard, I know how to work hard, and I know that I'm smart, but you work in a way that is inconsistent with the way they think about success, then you can work hard, but you won't be able to maximize your success in that role. And I said earlier that you can train people to think about you the way that you want to think about you. And the way that you create the perception that you want is you think about those 3 adjectives that you would like people to use to describe you when you are not in the room. And why do I say when you're not in the room? Is because all of the important decisions, as I just said, will be made when you are not in the room. So how do you want people to describe you? Once you've gotten those 3 adjectives, then your behavior should be consistent with those 3 adjectives. And if you do that for at least 2 quarters, if you have been in an organization for a long period of time and you're trying to change the perception, 2 quarters of consistent behavior around those adjectives will create the perception of you that you want people to have. If you're new into an organization, then all you need to do is have that behavior for 90 days. Those 3 months. And again, when people assess, was that a good hire? Was he or she a good addition to the team? If you've been consistent around your behavior, those 3 adjectives, they'll be describing you in that way.
That's really interesting. So now I'm thinking of my 3 adjectives, right? I work in a company that's got a lot of brilliant engineering leadership. There's a highly energetic sales leader. I got a CEO I work for who's off the charts brilliant. So then I'm trying to think, am I diplomatic? Yes, I have to be in my job, right? Am I supportive? Am I a great listener? There's all sorts of different things. I mean, this is something I think I may, when I tweet out, when we got this posted, I want to tweet out my 3 adjectives and encourage others to do so too. I think it's a great tip. And something, what are your 3 adjectives? And they may be different depending
And they
on
will
where you are in
change.
your career. Yeah.
Right. They will change, Ben, because my adjectives aren't the same as they were when I was an associate. So I'll give you an example. As an associate, what did people value as an associate in M&A? Somebody who was analytical, somebody who was quantitative, right? And somebody back then, they with that fire in the belly would walk through walls, right? But now, as a vice chairman and a managing director, nobody cares whether or not I can build a model. That is not valued in my role, but they do value if I'm commercial. They do value if I'm relationship oriented. I value fairness as one of them. And tough was one of the ones that, as you know, the story I like to tell, tough was one of the ones I wanted to make sure was a descriptor. Because frankly, as a woman on Wall Street, you should be perceived as tough. Not that you're mean or not that you're hard, but tough meaning you can make the tough calls and tell clients things that sometimes they don't want to hear. Right? That's what's valued in my role. In your role as a marketer, I would guess creative, out of the box thinker, collaborative, relationship oriented. Why? You have to have relationships to get good input. Collaborative, there's no monopoly on intelligence. You get it from all over the place. Out of the box thinker, you can come up with the idea that nobody else can and manifest it. that's valued in your seat, I would imagine. But we'd have to ask your CEO.
I think he'd agree, and I definitely agree with you on that one. What are adjectives for being a gospel singer who is performed at Carnegie Hall?
I'd say a hard worker for sure.
Yeah,
Somebody who has a great somebody who is focused, and somebody who can really read the crowd and integrate the spirit.
I think those are great answers. Reading the crowd. I mean, that takes back to how you relate to people in the room, be your authentic self. It's amazing how some of these characteristics, they rise you up in all sorts of different facets of your life. Carla Harris, Managing Director of Morgan Stanley, accomplished gospel singer. I'm definitely going to be listening to your music. Career coach. I don't know. There's so many different ways to authentically describe you. I don't know how do I end with it, other than to say thank you so much for joining us on Cloud Counsel. Just great. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I thought, how can anything be as fun as watching that YouTube of you speaking in Arizona? Well, I got to tell you, I feel like this is just as much fun. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It was my honor. That's how you can describe me, someone who's very happy to have spent some time with you today.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So everyone, today's discussion advice will be shortly available at Nutanix.com/CXO, where you can also view previous Cloud Counsel episodes. But I think this one may be the best so far, but
Thank you.
I'm being biased. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.